just like butter. It's insane. And it planes the same way. I mean, if like a couple times we had to block plane some joints, and it just like you also are ruining your block plane for anything else.
I can just hear the woodworking audience just like losing their mind right now. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Deputy Editor Matt Milham.
How's it going?
Digital Brand Manager Rob Wadsack.
Hey.
Producer Jeff Rose.
Hello.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Please email your questions to the same email address. See, I'm mixing up, guys. I'm starting to, get out of this rut we've got ourselves into, so just got to go with it. It's good to see you guys this morning. Thanks for being on the show.
Sure.
Yeah, man. Lovely Tuesday.
It is nice out, right? It's a little cold, but it's beautiful out.
It was frosty.
Rob, you've been working on your porch like a wild man.
Yeah.
I was dazzled to see porch framing go up.
It's awesome. It's honestly, I think it's one of my favorite projects I've ever done in this house, which is funny because it's the project that looks like it least goes with the house. Because, this house was built in 1871, and I feel like, my wife and I have this modern aesthetic, and I feel like this house has sort of tied our hands. And a lot of times we like, oh, well, we should put some traditional molding in that room, and I'm like, no, this is our patio where we're going to hang out and enjoy a lot of time outdoors. And I want it to look the way I want it to look. And
yeah. I mean, you got to enjoy your house, right? Like what's more important than that?
I know. I don't know.
What's more modernist than vinyl siding, though? Yeah. I'm just kidding.
So you successfully painted windows, which I find interesting, or it was unsuccessful. How would you describe it?
You're talking about that window frame?
Yeah.
So the window I put in, like I said, was this used window I bought at some local junk shop, and it's a what did I say? It was a Pella, I think.
Yes. A
Pella window, but I think it's about 15 or 20 years old, and it's a funny one because it has a vinyl clad sash, or whatever you want to call the internal part, and aluminum clad frame around that. So you've got these two different surfaces on the outside, and I didn't realize that at first because the edge was obviously aluminum. And so the aluminum took the paint I had fine.
And the plan was to match your black storm door, right?
Yeah. I've got a black storm door and black shutters on the back of the house, and it's just black is just sort of the contrasting color that goes on anything that doesn't go anything on anything. Yeah. So, no, I was literally just going to take this paint that I had in my basement, just to paint the edge of the aluminum frame before I put the siding in, so that I wouldn't have to try to cut into this weird
way
groove.
Easier then, right?
And I was going to come back later and paint the face, doing a nice prep job and using or whatever kind of primer was appropriate. And I didn't do that. I just was like, I'll just slap this coat of black paint on there, and it's just coming off of the vinyl in sheets. It's just, but the thing is, I don't even really care because it took me 1 minute to do that. It's going to take me 5 minutes to strip it, and in the meantime, I don't have this white window next to my black door while I'm working on the rest of the project. Like that. That's enough. It's worth it to me for it all to feel like it's got the right vibe,
Well, if you can't paint it, this winter because of temperatures, I would suggest putting some gaffer tape on it as an interim step. Just cover the sash and frame with black tape.
If it didn't have the logo on it, I would have just wrapped the zip tape right around it.
There's probably a good building science reason to do that anyway, right?
Yeah.
Matt, you've been taking care of your pups, I betcha. How are they doing?
They're doing fine. Like, they're just so rowdy. I got to train them more. It's my fault, but
you're a bad dad.
It's really just one of them. Like, the one is super calm. And so like, she's like, lulls you into thinking you don't really need to do that much. But then the other one is just like a menace.
They're the same litter though, right? So
as far as we know, it's hard to tell. Like, the one, had lost her baby teeth by the time we got her, like, almost 3 months ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one still has her baby teeth. So it's really hard to tell. I mean, they're growing at the same rate. They're both about 50 pounds now. They were like 25 when we got them. So
Oh my God, you must spend $100 a week on food.
yeah, they go through a lot of food. It's a lot of poop.
That's fun though. And the cats get along?
They don't love them, but they're slowly coming around. The dogs are way too interested in the cats for the cats, pleasure. So
I was interested to see a Facebook post of yours recently asking people about their experience with cordless framing nailers.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the response you got, and is there a clear winner?
It seems like there's a clear winner, although it's kind of maybe a little bit hard to say because so let me back up a little bit. So I'm talking specifically about battery operated cordless framing nailers. So not Pazloads. Makita also had a gas fired one. I think Bostitch maybe did at one time too, but these are just battery operated framing nailers. And DeWalt came out with one, I think originally, I think it was like the DCN 690 in like 2013. And I think that's been discontinued for a long time, but they had soon after that come out with another one. And, it's been around for years and some people use it. I don't think most people really like it that much. And then a few years ago, Hitachi came out with one that uses the DeWalt one uses a flywheel, so it's kind of slow to spin up and everything. And then Hitachi came out with one, now Metabo, and that was generally regarded as a pretty good gun. Most people seem to like it.
I used it. It was good at driving nails, but boy, was it heavy and big.
Yeah, that's the thing. So it is quite a bit heavier than the DeWalt gun. But as I've had it for a couple weeks now, and I've been using it, and it's great.
Yeah. Especially the convenience for like stuff like we do, right? We're not framing an entire house. We're framing a partition wall or doing something silly, and it's perfect for that.
Exactly. And then Milwaukee came out with two guns earlier this year, and they seem fantastic. They're so fast.
That's the one I've heard people like.
Yeah.
And it's because of its speed at nailing, and it's got a bigger magazine, or it has an optional magazine.
Yeah, it has an optional magazine, which actually kind of sucks. Like that you can't just buy the gun with it on there.
And how much extra is it? What is the
$80? And I ordered one last night. I wasn't going to get it for the article. I got it because I have a hunch, and I don't know if I'm right, that the Milwaukee 21 and 30 degree guns are the same gun, and the only thing that's different is the magazine.
I'll be interested to learn if that's true.
So I bought it with my own money just to test it. I didn't want to put ton on the line for this stupid experiment. But it has holes like that are unused on the gun, and like when you look at the pictures of them, it looks like the magazine looks like it would fit there. So
I can tell you from a manufacturing perspective, it would make a lot of sense to make the same mechanical part of the nailer and change the magazine, right? That would be way cheaper than making two completely different things.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, especially if, the extended magazine is $80, I mean, half of that, at least, probably more than that, is profit.
Yeah, because I'm sure they always get you on the accessories.
Right. And it comes with this, smaller magazine that holds one rack of nails. So, it's...
I'm sure Milwaukee would argue that this tool is meant for remodelers who don't blast through tons of nails, and, they would rather have the compact size of a smaller magazine than a big one, is my guess. And whether that's true or not, I think depends on the individual.
That may be the case, but I think that was definitely one of the biggest complaints that people had about the other nailers, is that, if you wanted to do any kind of serious framing with it, not that you necessarily could with the DeWalt, it's just slow. You can get a pace going, and, and it's pretty good in bump fire. Not as good as the others, I would say, just because of the flywheel not having nearly the power.
Yeah.
The others basically have pneumatic-like performance because they're fired by these like air springs that are basically pistons, and the motor that's in the gun essentially is just used to reset these things. So it happens very quickly.
I can tell you the practicality of these tools has advanced light years in my lifetime. You know, the only thing that existed when I was a young carpenter was the Paslode Impulse. And even that was an incredible revelation in nailing, right? It was amazing.
But they could be fussy, and then you always had to make sure you had enough gas cartridges on the job site. And
yeah, if you use it like irregularly, as I do, because I have a Paslode too, like I don't use it enough to, like, it just seems unreliable to me because like the gas goes bad before you consume all of it, or, you know, like you accidentally leave the battery in and it's just constantly on standby, and then it drains and like it's dead by the next day anyway. So constantly recharging batteries, constantly checking gas, and it's not super good in the cold, and you know, it's cold here.
Yeah, and it stinks. It's probably not good for you to be breathing in a closed space.
I
right?
kind of like that smell.
You like it? Just get a propane stove and turn it on, but don't light it.
Jeez.
So I have to say, you know, this conversation has reminded me of something. I've been perfectly happy working at home, but one thing I really guess I miss out on a lot working at home is I don't have that pile of tools that you guys have on your desks readily available for when I have a project. Like, because I could have really used one of those nailers when I put my double LVL beam together the other day. I realized sitting at a desk how weak my arms are. Swinging
So
a framing
you don't
hammer.
have a nailer of any framing nail of any type?
I do have a framing nailer. I'm pretty sure I lent it to my dad. He said I never gave it to him, so I don't have a framing nailer anymore.
Well, I know what to get you for Christmas, because everybody should have a framing nailer.
I know.
Yeah, I'll give you my pneumatic gun. I don't need it anymore.
You're going to regret that, because if you have to nail off sheathing or something, you're going to be, I should have kept that thing.
Yeah, no, that's probably true.
Jeff, what have you been working on? You got any exciting projects around the house?
No, not at all.
I think that's good because,
It's winter, hibernation time.
Yeah, well, I'm transitioning between outside stuff and inside stuff, and I haven't started inside stuff yet. So
I was working on a print piece for the magazine talking about building your first home after being a remodeler. And a part of the narrative is my experience building 2 little Habitat for Humanity homes in Pittsburgh. And our art director asked me to dig through my old photographs and pull out stuff that might show the house. And I didn't find that, but I found this amazing photograph here. Can you guys see that?
Nice.
Is that Carol?
No, that's me with long hair.
Oh.
He wanted to go with Garth for Halloween. It took 2 years to get there.
So for those of you who are not watching the podcast, it's me driving a bulldozer, which was probably one of the highlights of my entire life. But at the same time, I also had these flowing golden locks that have since turned more gray than gold. So it was a trip down memory lane, and it brought back a bunch of fantastic memories of doing that job, which I did enjoy quite a bit. And then more recently, I was talking to the production manager for the Washington, D.C. affiliate on Pro Talk. So be looking for that. Dan Hines was the gentleman I was talking to, and his experience I think you all will find pretty interesting. So look for that.
that was the episode earlier this week.
So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, make sure you tune in and give it a listen. Hi, FHB Podcast. I recently listened to episode 199. I have some feedback for different types of heaters. My wife and I recently finished building our own house in Central Oregon. Did I say that right this time?
Pretty good.
We used lots of input from the podcast, and we're happy that we now have a comfortable, efficient house. For heating, we have 5 different heaters. A 12,000 BTU Mitsubishi split unit in the main room is what we use most of the time, leaving it set and letting it modulate. In the master bedroom, we installed a 6,000 BTU Mitsubishi unit, which we rarely ever use for heat. We're actually more likely to turn it on at night for AC, even when it gets into the 40s. The 2 split units do a great job keeping the house comfortable. It's only gotten down to 10 degrees briefly this year, but they kept the house at temperature. The HVAC contractor we started with tried to have a 36,000 BTU 3-head multi-split system installed, which it would have been way oversized. Is that And that's so typical. And I'm delighted that our listener would pay attention and check them on their numbers, because you really have to. In the entryway, I installed a 2,000-watt Stiebel Eltron wall-mounted fan heater. It has a freeze protection mode, and I figured that the fan would help move air toward the rest of the house if it ever runs. In the second bedroom, we went with a 2,000-watt Stiebel Eltron wall-mounted convection heater. It's completely silent and provides a little supplemental heat if the person sleeping there wants it. I was wary of putting a split unit in the bedroom because even the smallest 6,000 BTU unit would be oversized for the space. The room stays comfortable in the summer, with it being in the southwest corner of the house and the outside temperatures in the 90 to 100 degree range. The bathroom received a 750-watt heating green radiant electric heater. It's visually basically invisible, is silent, and heats the objects in the room nicely. All the heaters are hardwired, 220-volt, each on their own circuit. The total of 4,750 watts of resistant heat adds up to about 16,000 BTUs of heating capacity. Chris from Terrebonne. Chris, I got to think you're an engineer.
Can I just say one thing about this? He's saying he's got 16,000 BTU of electric resistance, and he's got 18,000 on these mini splits. That's 34,000. Like, he's only off from 2,000 from what was originally spec'd.
I'm sure what he's saying is he's not using the resistance heat except intermittently, right?
Yeah. But I mean, then does he need it? Did he add too much? Did he say no? That's too much, and then add too much? I like the freeze
protection of the entryway heater, right? So if you have a, Mitsubishi system failure or two or whatever, this is going to keep the house from freezing, and it apparently gets pretty cold there.
Yeah.
Well, also one thing I was listening to. Have you guys ever listened to that 99% Invisible podcast?
Oh my God, I'm sick of everyone talking about this in my entire life.
Anyway, there was an episode on comfort. It was started out talking about air conditioning, but they were talking about how we've gotten to the point where we have this narrow view of what comfort is based on some sort of standard that is pretty narrow. And if you go to any house or any office, you'll always find people who are uncomfortable because it's too cold or too hot for them. And so the idea of having these sort of spot heaters in bathrooms and spare bedrooms for sort of getting that extra comfort for the people who use those spaces, I don't know. I think that kind of makes a lot of sense.
I do too. And they're not expensive. And if you're not running them all the time, they're cheap to run.
Yeah. Yeah, because I even did the math running one of those little 1,700 watt heaters in my little barn workshop. If I just left the thing on for 24 hours, I mean, it's only a few dollars. So it's like, it's for how often I use it, it's going to be little to no cost to me,
Matt, do you think we are too comfort driven, or have we gotten soft?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I work in my garage. I just put on a jacket, and if I put on gloves if I need it. I don't worry about the heat so much. Work keeps you warm.
Yeah, right. The heat's in the tools.
Yeah.
I had a coworker who used to say that.
Yeah. I mean, but that said, I mean, like I feel like I run hot, and I just put on an extra, sweater or something if I'm cold. And, my wife would much rather turn up the heat sometimes, and often she's just like on the couch covered in a blanket. So
I've gotten way less hardy in my advancing years. I used to be pretty hardcore, but less so every year. Get cold easy.
Eventually you give in. I'm sure I will too.
This comes from John. We hear from John a lot. John, thanks for listening. I always read your feedback, and I do appreciate it very much. Reading through the FHB mag, it looks as if I was the guest editor. The piece by Ben Bogey on sensors is something I've been asking questions about for a while now. Many of the builds I see on YouTube and Instagram have plenty of budget for this. I would like to see more discussion on this general topic. Sensors, inspection ports, ways to blow air into assemblies when the worst occurs to enhance drying. Much like with the traditional double hungs, where there were access panels to get to the weights and sash cords, could new windows have such devices either built in or have a port to install and access them? GBA, can you add an assembly plan that includes these details so those who are interested can now see how it's done? Patrick complained about GC's abilities to build a house that doesn't turn to mulch if there's a WRB failure. If just 1% of the houses built these sensors, imagine the data we could generate for manufacturers, architects, and contractors. Last night at bed, I was reading old posts from Building Science Fight Club and seeing picture after picture of failed wall assemblies. They don't look like mush right away. So what do you guys think about this? Are we going to build in inspection ports so we can look at our wall assemblies, put sensors in there?
Well, every time I think about insulating my limestone basement, I feel like I would need to put some sort of inspection ports in there, because I don't trust what's going to happen when I seal that porous stone up, So I don't know. Maybe it's not such a bad idea.
Matt, did you work on this story with Ben Bogey?
No, I did help edit it, but I didn't.
Do you want to tell folks who might not have read this what the gist is, please?
Yeah, so they build double stud walls with dense packed cellulose typically when they do new builds, and there has sort of long been this idea that this is a risky wall assembly, that there's going to be like moisture problems, and so sort of, I guess, to bat that down to some extent. And I don't know that he says this explicitly in there, but Ben and I have talked about it in other forums,
Mm-hmm.
and as have his boss or former boss now, Dan Colbert, and I, that they just don't see it, and they put these sensors in the walls and in various places where they expect to find problems, usually on the north sides of buildings and stuff like that, and monitor this stuff, for years to see if, they're getting any of the moisture concerns that the modeling shows from like Building Science Corporation and others, I guess. And they just don't see it. It's really just to make sure that the building is performing as they think it will, and to identify problems, because there may be problems at some point, and you want to know sort of like what the conditions are inside the house, if somebody's running humidifiers or, whatever, so they can get sort of like a broad view of everything that's going on inside the house and outside the house at the same time, to get an idea of like why an event is occurring if it occurs.
Interesting. So the Fine Homebuilding piece describes the hardware that they're using and how the data is retrieved, and I found it very interesting. They also do unvented, deep, dense pack cellulose roof assemblies, which is something that people have warned us about for years not to do, but they don't have any trouble, and they've been monitoring. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. But I mean, some of this stuff, blow air into assemblies when the worst occurs. I mean, there's not a lot of airspace to even blow air through. I mean, I remember once working on, this was sort of a mistake that happened when I was working on a straw bale house. So we had started doing the infill for the walls, and there was another crew, another company actually had done the framing for this structure, and they were building out the entryway, and they had built it at the wrong elevation, and they had sheathed the roof and everything, but they hadn't taped it yet when the owner got there, and they were like, this isn't lining up right. And so anyway, they had used zip system on the roof, and because they knew they had to come back and rip it out the next day, they didn't tape any of the seams. Poured like crazy that night, and the water came down, and it was just channeled by this new structure that was there, channeled right into the walls, like with all of this straw there. Nothing was plastered yet or anything, but all this water just dumped on there. So for about a week, we ran like these industrial fans just trying to dry these bales out. And like, I got there early one morning, and it was pretty cool out, and the bales were just steaming. And I stuck my hands in there, and it was warm as could be. I mean, it was just compost.
You were making compost.
We were making compost. So like, just had to rip that wall down and start over again.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like sort of a best case scenario for the amount of air that you're going to be able to get in there. So, I mean, if you're using dense packed cellulose, it's pretty much the same thing. You know, I mean, the cellulose and straw is pretty much exactly the same thing as the cellulose you're putting in when you're doing dense packed cellulose.
Well, it does have borates added to it to make
That would be the difference. So yeah, it would retard, mold and stuff like that, but it's not going to dry out.
Yeah, it's never going to dry. What do you think, Rob? You going to leave little inspection windows in your upstairs
because we've talked about this before, how like cutting a hole in a wall, like you were talking earlier about, like you need to get some concrete in a building. You cut a hole in a wall.
It's easy to fix.
It's easy to fix a hole. I don't think I would go through the trouble of making elaborate, because who knows even where you're going to want them. It's like I think that, I think it's a good idea, but I think it's unnecessary.
It's wacky. I think monitoring is great. Inspection ports and I think ways to dry assemblies is kind of bizarre.
And I also think the key is just that if you pick smart building assemblies, then to lower the risks, then that's really more important than trying to build risky buildings with inspection ports, I think.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean, the worst case scenario is, I assume, like a flood. So, you need to take all the measures that you can to either not build in a floodplain or, do something else to make it flood resistant.
Yeah, or use less water sensitive materials at the lower grade of the house, like that kooky beach house we saw last year in the magazine. The whole downstairs was concrete.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, and that's a good reason if you're living on the beach, right? But most flood events are resultant from like pipe failures, right? In normal situations, unless it's a flash flood or a high wind event or whatever, and you have insurance for that, right? And like that's why we have insurance.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty rare, I think you guys would agree. Except Matt, you've had this situation
yesterday,
very recently.
Yeah, this was really more like a mistake than anything. Like, sort of at the beginning of all of this, I don't know what we would call it, lockdown. I mean, nobody was ever locked down. So anyway, but we had decided to do some work on one of our 50s era bathrooms, and it changed a toilet, and I built a new vanity and got a new sink for that. But I had neglected to buy in all this because I wasn't sure what came with the toilet, and I hadn't gotten the supply connector, like the right one. So I had this 50s era thing that didn't quite work, but worked well enough for the time being. And something happened. Except it didn't because it sealed fine as long as nobody touched the tank and everything. It was sort of like a temporary thing that I forgot about. And then yesterday I go downstairs and there's a puddle in the basement, and I'm like, it had rained like crazy the night before. I'm like, oh no, is this back again? I thought we had this solved. And the water's only in the middle of the floor. I'm like, oh man. So I'm looking all around, like ceiling tiles are wet all over the place, the ones that I haven't pulled out yet. And it was really hard to figure out where exactly this was coming from. And
because it was probably traveling on the top of the drop ceiling, right?
It wasn't even traveling on that. It was traveling sort of all over the floor. It had, I don't know, somehow gone through the wall into the other bathroom. I'm checking both bathrooms to see where this could possibly be coming from. And the turns out the floor in that bathroom with the new toilet is sloped backwards. So this leak was happening at the toilet, and the water was just going basically straight back underneath, basically in the crack at the wall there, and coming down, but sort of saturating all of the sheathing underneath for, I don't know, a good 6 feet. And then it was just dripping down everywhere. But it was just this really small leak that had, that was going for a few hours, and, it didn't get anything that wet, but,
You can imagine, though, if you were away on vacation or whatever,
and
this happened, you would come back to a pretty messed up house, I suspect.
Well, at least the sheathing would have been pretty soaked, yeah. And my basement would have been pretty wet, but, it wasn't enough water. The fortunate
thing is, in your house and in most houses, this stuff dries without any problem. But if you had dense packed cellulose walls, I would worry more about that, right?
Yeah, and then the fortunate thing was, this was going into and underneath an interior wall, actually a chase wall. So, it's got a big airspace in there.
Right.
This was the one that I previously kept that went all the way from the basement to the attic, and was a mouse superhighway that my cat used to
You
sit
might
up in
want to
the.
temporarily uncork that for some stack effect drying.
Yeah. Yep.
So he did ask about how's that house doing that was built at $48 a square foot from the spring home houses issue from 1994.
Do you have an update on that, Rob?
I don't have an update on the house, but I could at least tell you what house he was talking about. It was a house built in Maine with Larson trusses by a guy by the name of Jim Young.
And so my assumption is that he built this all by himself, because even in 1994, there's no way you could have had a professionally built home for $50 a square foot.
Yeah, he said that the difference in cost for doing the Larson truss system, he was only like $6,500, which was like 5% of the cost of the whole house. And he said that according to the article at the time, they said that they couldn't convince their insurance agent that the place would stay above freezing with no heat on in the wintertime. But they said they had some negative 20-degree weather and the house was 40 degrees inside. So
40? That doesn't sound very comfortable.
No, this is talking about like when they were away from the house. Yeah, no, they weren't. They're talking about like the resiliency of the house being that it's not a danger for it to be unheated for lengths of time.
What was the foundation system for that?
Do
you remember?
I'm taking a look. I mean, it looks like it's a concrete foundation, but the Larson truss has come out past it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I can't tell.
We'll have to link this article on the podcast website, right, Rob?
Well, yeah, I had to go into the archives to find it. It's not actually live on the website, but maybe I will pull it out and publish it on the website.
Oh, we have to, because I want to read it.
Yeah.
Greetings, FHB podcast team. I have some questions about the shaker shed that was highlighted in the magazine earlier this year. I want to know about the trim and materials that were used. How was the foundation constructed? Is there a vapor barrier under the crushed stone? Will the rock wool insulation stay dry? I'd like to build a storage building that is as well done as this shed that Justin and Matt built. Love the podcast. Watch it every week. Thanks, Ed. Well, Matt, how is this thing built, and is the insulation going to get wet?
The way it was built,
there's no vapor barrier. I know that, right?
Yeah, there's no vapor barrier. There was some discussion about that because I think initially there was that had been included in the details, and we had a little talk about it and thought it would basically just create a swimming pool.
Because it would pool water on top, right?
It would pool water on top, and then that stone would just never dry out. Yeah. So what they did, and the homeowner actually, did the base for all of this. So he had sort of
the homeowner, Rodney Diaz,
being Rodney Diaz, our
art director.
our director.
Yeah, he doesn't have to remain anonymous.
Yeah. So
we got to blame somebody, right?
Yeah. So he had sort of dug out and sort of formed, I guess, with, I think it was PT deck boards, sort of like a base perimeter for this thing. And then, filled it with crushed stone and leveled it out, or maybe some kind of gravel. I don't remember exactly what he used. And then formed up sort of what was the foundation, which was 6x6 PT, that he just kind of used long structural screws to tack together. And that was pretty much it. And then we, built on top of that. But yeah, we left a vapor barrier out. That was part of the reason for using the stone wool was, that stuff can get wet and dry out, and it doesn't compromise its R value at all, and it's not going to rot. So, and
the shed, we have to point out, is going to be ambient temperature, right? So you're not creating a warm.
It's not going to be air conditioned.
It's not going to be warm in there, cold in there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no conditions for causing vapor drive in any one direction. So that's not really an issue. But there is an issue with water sort of like coming down the hill behind that shed. And so we knew that there was a possibility that if we had a vapor barrier in there, it would, could cause more problems than it would possibly solve.
There are other ways to do this too, right?
Yeah. I mean, thinking back on it, I think if you wanted a vapor barrier, you probably could put one right on top of the joist over the insulation, right under the sheathing. But, that's, if you're going to condition it and you are are really concerned about maybe upward vapor, coming up through the stone, but I don't know. We all thought about it, and we weren't really exactly sure what to do for a building of this type. And it was kind of modeled on a shed that is more than 100 years old, I think, at Hancock Shaker Village. That's on a rubble stone foundation with no vapor
there's
barrier,
no
and it's
plastic
perfectly
vapor
fine.
retarder under that building, guaranteed.
Yeah. So there weren't, at the end of the day, we were just like, this thing doesn't need to last forever. It's, Rodney's shed.
Well, if any of our listeners have strong opinions about this subject, I'd love to hear them. The other way is to like kind of dig gravel footings, for lack of a better description, and then put solid blocks on that gravel pad, and then, get it a few inches off the ground with a vapor barrier or in gravel or not, and then start building.
Yeah. I guess, because it was something when I saw the video of you guys putting it together, one of the things that sort of like caught my eye right away. I guess the thing to me is the fact that it's basically exposed, fluffy insulation facing down to the ground. And I mean, I was thinking of it even as much from a rodent nesting potential, anything else. Like I feel like if I were going to do that shed, I might want to either encapsulate that insulation in another layer of sheathing, and do joists on top of that, and then infill with the insulation, or just use foam instead of the rock wool.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different things we could have done, but I think a lot of it was just simplicity.
Yeah.
Why insulate it at all if it's not going to be conditioned?
Well, I think he wants to have it a workspace in there. Is what he was talking about.
Yeah, and the possibility of conditioning it in the future. So that's why you might want to have some sort of a vapor barrier in the floor. But again, because the materials that we're using it was an Advantech floor. That stuff, you see it out on job sites, get just absolutely soaked, and it doesn't seem to really, it tolerates moisture pretty well. And we didn't think that was going to be much of an issue, but
it's a shed. And it's a shed.
Exactly. It's a shed. It's going to be like a little workshop.
And at the end of the day, it's a shed.
Yep. But I mean, for the trim, it was just LP Smart Side. They're flat, siding material. It's not really beveled. What LP Smart Side is.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. So you used the siding material for both the trim and the clapboards?
Didn't use
that
Boral?
was that was just for the clapboards, and then for the rest of the trim, it was Boral True Exterior.
Okay.
The fly ash stuff.
Yeah, the fly ash trim.
How do you like working with that?
It cuts super easy. It trashes your blades, but like they'll cut that stuff all day. And
I find that such an interesting property. We have to explain that to people.
Yeah.
So if you cut the true exterior material, it will ruin the blade for cutting anything else, but you can keep cutting that true exterior material for seemingly ever.
Yeah, because it cuts so easy. Like it almost feels like you're not cutting through anything. It cuts through it so just like butter. It's insane. And it planes the same way. I mean, if like a couple times we had to block plane some joints, and it just like you also are ruining your block plane for anything else.
I can just hear the woodworking audience just like losing their mind right now.
Yeah. And I was doing it with this nice little, like, I think Lee Nielsen, like hand like little block plane.
I've used it a couple of times, and to me, it kind of has the consistency of like balsa wood. Like it's just like really soft wood with a really fine grain. Like it just cuts so consistently and smoothly. And
can I assume that was a donation, because Rodney's not going to open his wallet to buy that stuff?
I have no idea who bought it, but
no way.
And while it is balsa wood, like in the way it cuts, it is heavy. Like it's really heavy. It's really not that stiff.
It's noodly.
It's really noodly, like when it's full length, and you really have to be careful not to snap it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But for because I've only used it for like a water table at the base of an old house that was really close to the ground, and that's just like the perfect location for that kind of stuff.
It doesn't have the movement problems of PVC either, right? That's a huge advantage.
It's supposed to be dimensionally stable. You can use it right at grade, unlike like Hardy. So
I've been told you're allowed to like run it in contact with roof shingles and stuff, which is a serious no-no for most siding types.
Right. Yeah. So you don't need to leave any of those gaps that you would with fiber cement, which is really nice. So I mean,
don't
like,
believe it though.
Aesthetically, like you can, make something that looks a lot nicer.
I don't believe it.
Yeah. You're always a skeptic, Patrick.
Yeah. Andy Grace has used it a lot. Go back to some of his projects and see what it looks like.
All right,
I'll ask him.
Yeah.
Let's build something on Patrick's barn out of it, and we'll see how it looks after a year.
It's funny, I have the white pine siding, and it's had a couple coats of paint since the original one. I keep it maintained, but it's like brand new. Even the bottom. So there's vertical siding, so there's end grain close to grade, right, and leaves build up underneath it and stuff, and it's been great. You just got to keep stuff painted, which is no fun to do when you're talking about it's up on the roof of your house or a sidewall or whatever. But if you maintain stuff, it works better.
Yep.
Hey guys, John the contractor / appraiser here from Rhode Island. Still working on my home appraisal article proposal, but here's my newest get-rich-quick scheme for your review. Is there any reason that Great Stuff, etc., doesn't make a smaller size can of foam? As a remodeler, frequently I open a can of spray foam for one door, a couple of windows, and wind up with a mostly full can that is no good after a couple hours. Is it just a lack of demand that has stopped this from being an off-the-shelf option? Thanks for all your great work. Yours truly, John. I read his last name. Jeff, can you cut that out? Yours truly, John. I think this is a fantastic idea.
Small cans?
Yeah, why not?
See, I don't know. You converted me, Patrick, I think, to the spray gun.
A gun.
Because
get a pro gun.
As long as you use it every so often, it stays good in the gun for months and months and months. So.
Well, I'm going to go back on what I said about that because I've destroyed like 2 since I told everyone to do that. So.
Yeah, what's the max time that you can leave that in?
6 months, maybe?
Program?
So the guy from Total, right? TUDOL, Total Products. I don't know if I'm saying that correct, but he says 30 days. So if you squirt the foam out every 30 days, you should be fine. But for whatever reason, I'm just too lame to remember to do that. So
you got to set a reminder on your calendar.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put the spray foam gun on my desk here and just shoot some out every day.
Yeah.
There you go. Make some art piece in the corner, right?
John, I think that's a great idea. I would tell you, I get your situation where you're, a remodeler doing small projects. If you're doing bigger projects, I wait to like all the spray foaming for one day, right? Like let it accumulate if you can.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion because I don't know that they're ever going to make smaller cans. It would be fantastic if they did, but I just try to wait to use it until I have a lot of things to use it on because I don't want to waste it.
So here's the thing. DAP is claiming, because I've bought a couple small cans of Great Stuff recently, that they are now they don't jam up. Apparently they've changed the nozzle in the straw. So they claim that the new cans work better, but I don't believe that either.
Mm.
I mean, they did come out with those little weird plastic tips on the hoses, supposedly but I think that's just really short term, right? Like when you're working on a project throughout the day, you can pop that little tip closed.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Either do lots of projects at once or get a gun or
suck it up.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm sure DAP doesn't make a smaller can because why would they sell less foam rather than more foam? I'm surprised they don't make one that's like 8 feet tall that you can put on your lumber rack.
Well, they used to have smaller cans, and then they would have like the can that says like 10% more or whatever, and then they just stopped making the little one. I think it's all the big cans now.
So I bought the can that's probably 6 or 7 inches tall recently. So have you seen them smaller than that?
No.
So they still offer those, at least at Home Depot.
Mm.
Do you still have a foam gun, Rob?
I do, yeah.
Is it working still? Have you tried it recently?
I haven't used it I used it around my window when I put it in.
So a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Matt, you have one?
No, I would love to have one, but I don't even know if I would use it that much because I don't use much spray foam.
What about you, Jeff? Have you been sold on these things?
Yeah. But I, like you, have gone through 2 of them by not using it often enough.
Why is this such a technological hurdle in our advanced society? This question comes from Green Building Advisor, our company's website that Kylie now works for, and Brian Pontalillo came back from, and it's an awesome resource. So this person wrote in, I'm in the process of closing on a house in Redwood City, California, climate zone 3. It's in a FEMA AE flood zone. The house is from the 40s. It's 1,000 square feet with shingle siding. It has 1x3 and 1x4 board sheathing, an insulated ceiling with lots of penetrations from can lights, a semi-finished loft that connects the garage, attic, and living room, a wall furnace for heating, and a recently encapsulated crawl space. Here are the things we want to do. Install an air source heat pump to replace the existing furnace. Given that we're in a flood zone, I'd like to place this in the attic, which, if it could be done. Things I'd like to do. I'd like to install a dedicated ventilation system to air seal the house from smoke from the frequent wildfires. I want to insulate and air seal the roof walls and crawl space. I want to remove the old chimney and fireplace that we're not planning on using, and it's taking up a good deal of floor and garage space. Maybe finish the remainder of the attic for storage/play space, as number 2 is on the way. Things we're interested in avoiding: smoke infiltration from the increasingly bad wildfire seasons, extreme damage from flooding, poor heating cooling performance, structural issues due to the age and construction of the house, mold mildew in the crawl space, contributing to poor air quality, fire danger because of the lack of fire-resistant siding. On the inspection report, it pointed out that some collar ties had been removed and there was, quote, a normal amount of sagging for a roof of this age and structure. There's a long horizontal crack in the perimeter foundation in the exterior wall of the garage. You could get a dime inside, but maybe not a quarter. The crawl space was sealed by the previous owner and they installed a sump pump, but I haven't been able to check if they sealed the vents, and it doesn't look like there's any insulation. There's still some mold down there, but it could be that the company didn't remediate it properly. Also, given that I'm a flood zone, would it make sense to install an insulated flood vent product like Smart Vent? Wow, what do you guys think? Did you look at this little house?
Did we have a
because
photo?
there were no photographs.
Yeah, we went online and looked at similar houses in that town, so I can kind of picture it's one of those probably low slung, very simple bungalow kind of houses, right?
These things are all over the country, right? Built after the war, simple, cheap.
Yep. And
what's different about Redwood City, California, though, Rob?
Fires, floods, earthquakes,
1,000 square foot
rivers of blood.
Yeah, 1,000 square foot is $1.5 million is what I picked up on.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, so that's the thing is like, because the first thought I know for some people, including people responding in the GBA forum, was, oh, I wouldn't spend that much money on this little 1,000 square foot house, especially in the floodplain. But when your house is already worth $1 million with no improvements, it's kind of, I think it's worth it, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah. But so, you know, I don't know if this list is in any order of priorities, but the general rule of thumb is that you deal with the moisture and crawl spaces and basements first. Then you deal with
more fundamentally are the posters on the GBA site, and there's a number of very good responses, I would say. They're pointing out structural issues first, right? All of the air sealing and other stuff doesn't matter if you have to tear it all apart to fix structural problems later.
Yeah, for sure. So you deal with the structure, then the water, then the envelope, and then you can start thinking about all the other things he was talking about, like the
moving the furnace and sealing the crawl space. And I would worry about fire, but I don't know that you can really solve that problem easily because Redwood City is crowded, right? And you know, even if you make your house super fire resistant, those fires get so hot from other structures around you burning that I don't know what you can do.
Yeah, but so like he's talking about insulating and air sealing. I mean, if you're going to replace the siding, then maybe that's a good opportunity to start dealing with the exterior.
At least make it better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you're really to air seal that. I think you have to take the siding off probably. I mean, if you got board sheathing, unless he's going for like an airtight drywall approach, but that seems like it would be a terrible idea for something like this because you're not going to. What are you going to do for the floor?
Yeah,
and so you know, I have mixed feelings about this. I want people to be comfortable in their homes. I think it's wise to spend money to improve them. But like, this is a really mild climate. This is like the perfect place to live.
Well, it does get down into the 30s in the winter there.
That's why they have the wall furnace, and in a 1,000 square foot house.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like, we've talked about this before, because I think we were talking with Kylie not long ago about her oil furnace that she has and replacing it. And it's like, well, if you're not using a lot of heat and the thing is working, replacing it with a more efficient heating system is probably one of the last things you want to do on this list here.
Because you're talking, I mean, in California, my guess is it would be 10 grand or more to replace and duct and add a cooling system to this house, right? Even as small as it is.
Yeah.
And with a crawl space, I think that would help because you could run ductwork more easily. But
I was really wondering what he was talking about when he was talking about putting this air source heat pump in an attic, and then
maybe they meant ceiling cassettes, right? And then of course the outdoor unit has to be outdoors, but you can't.
Well, that's what I was wondering, like, because he was talking about getting it off the ground, and like his thought was putting it in the attic, like. It's not a self-flicking ice cream cone. It's like there's no perpetual motion machine. It's taking heat from one area and dumping it in another. So you cannot put an air source heat pump. You cannot put the outdoor unit inside.
Yeah, even if it is in an open attic, right? You can't do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. No.
Yeah, you can put them on the wall. I've heard of people complaining when they do that the vibration is disturbing in some cases. But
I'll tell you what, I can speak to that because I specifically was advised by the guys who did mine to put it on the ground because of that reason, especially with my balloon framed house. It'd probably be transmitting those vibrations all the way up to the second floor. It's on the outside on a gravel bed on the floor. But if I'm in the bathroom adjacent to it or the bedroom that's right nearby it, just the contact of the coolant lines with the sheathing of the house creates enough vibration that you can hear it. You can hear the vibration in the house. So I can't imagine what a whole unit being in your attic or on the wall, even on the wall of the house, would feel like.
Mm.
I suspect that's a problem you could solve, but I've heard it a number of times.
I think what I would do with the heat pump is just put it up get a custom frame built for it and build it up off the ground on a frame. Maybe it's on some sturdy pressure treated posts that are set into the ground or something like that wouldn't cost that much and that would be easy enough to do.
Yeah.
You also have to, remember that someone's going to have to service this thing at some point, right? So it can't be too hard to get to.
Yeah.
But
right?
Even if it's like a few feet off the ground, I mean, if it's getting wet up there, you've got much bigger problems because your entire house is going to be flooded at that point.
Yes.
And then you're talking about an insurance claim. It doesn't really matter that thing's destroyed.
Yeah. And I suspect if you're in this FEMA flood zone, you have to have flood insurance, right? Or you don't get a mortgage. Isn't that correct?
I would imagine so. I'll tell you one thing though. I think as California's environmental issues seem to become more and more apparent to the rest of the world. I feel like we as editors, even though we don't deal with the as much on the East Coast, just need to become a lot more familiar with the requirements and the options for dealing with them out there. Because I don't think about fire resistant siding when I'm thinking about my remodeling projects on my house, but obviously you have to think about that out there for sure.
And I don't think anyone thinks it's going to be less frequent.
No,
not anytime soon.
I want to read one of our respondents' responses because it's sometimes tough love is what you need. And I'm not sure I agree with everything Walter says, but it's pretty entertaining. I'm sorry to be a dream crusher, but it will cost way too much money to turn this sow's ear into a silk purse. All 40s houses are post-war material, were in short supply and housing was in high demand. Almost everything was built as small as possible, less than 1,000 square feet. There were no time and materials for charm and details, just fast and simple. A fireplace would have been a big luxury option. With that said, it is hard to believe that this is your forever dream home. It is your starter home or home that for the next few years, and that is great, but you need to recognize that as a fact. If you decide to make changes to the house, they must add to the resale value of the home. I think it's foolish to spend big money on this or any other house that is in a 500-year floodplain. Why is the furnace on the must replace list? Is it broken beyond repair? Will this add to the resale value? Not unless the old unit is useless. Opening up the walls and adding insulation will not add 1 penny to the resale value and will take 100 years to repay at today's fuel prices. Short of stripping down every wall to the studs, it's very unlikely you'll be able to stop enough of the air leaks to make a ventilation system necessary or effective. Adding insulation does not add to the resale value of a home. It can be a good investment only if you stay in the home long enough to recover the cost and fuel savings. Given today's fuel prices, wall insulation will never see a payback, and if the attic floor has any more than IR8, add to that, will have to have anything to add to that will have a very long payback. Removing the fireplace detracts from the home's resale value. The floor space you could recover will not change the number of square feet on the real estate paperwork, and that is the number that adds value to the sale. Adding or bringing a staircase up to code in these tiny homes is very often destroys the floor plan and looks awkward. You need to understand the TV shows about real estate are total fiction. If you pay a contractor to make home improvements, you will never recover more than 100% of the costs at resale. DIY, it is possible if you do very good work, buy at the right price, and in the right neighborhoods. I say you enjoy your house for what it is and save your money to build your dream home. What do you guys think? That's pretty harsh.
I mean, I'm pretty much totally on board with Walter on this. I mean, yeah, I mean, I have a hard time because I think this guy had mentioned that the baby number 2 was on the way, and to have 4 people living in a 1,000-square-foot house.
People used to do that all the time. I
know.
don't understand what that's.
Yeah,
what the obstacle
and it's
is
not
to that.
It's not that it's unusual or anything like that, but I mean, they didn't have, learning from home, like, everybody on a Zoom call, like in different rooms of the house and stuff like
Admittedly,
that. Like
that makes things
today.
different. It absolutely does.
So, I mean, it really, depending on what the future looks like, and nobody has a crystal ball, we don't know what, if this thing is going to drag on until, this kid's in high school. Hope not.
I hope not, and I don't think it will.
No, I don't think so either. But I mean, I think if you think this is the one and only time this is going to happen,
Okay, so what about the fireplace that's in the way? We know that fireplaces are a terrible way to heat your house, right? They consume more energy than they give you.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would love to get rid of my fireplace as well, but it is a thing that people look for some reason. If it's not doing anything for you, I don't know. How is it in the way?
Because if it's 1,000 square feet, any huge masonry thing is going to be in the way, right?
But I mean, if it's on an exterior wall and like it's not actually like all it's doing is taking up, sort of wall space, just put something in front of it if you're not using it. What does it matter? I mean, it may look weird to have a TV in front of something like that, but
it sounds like it also the chimney maybe intrudes into the garage space too, because he was complaining about space in there too. But yeah, I mean, you got to think about the amount of effort it's going to take. Especially if it's in the middle of the house, because then you got to patch the roof too.
Right.
I don't know.
Jeff, what do you think about this whole proposition?
I think the idea that, this is $1 million house kind of changes the math a little bit.
Right.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
That changes it a whole bunch, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I think that, in terms of cost of materials, that's insignificant.
To the value of the house.
Right.
Yeah. And so if you're doing this work yourself, it's a no-brainer. If you have to pay someone to do this in California, it's going to cost a ton, no doubt. So,
but you also don't want to be doing any of this work while you've got your family in there. I mean, if this is a 1940s era house, God knows what the heck is in there. Asbestos, lead paint, whatever. You do not want to have a baby in that space when you're doing it.
That's a very good point.
Make sure that all this work is done before you move in.
It's a very good point.
Also, I was kind of wondering about how HRVs and ERVs work in fire areas. It's like, or are they not allowed?
Well, I mean, for starters, unless you remove the fireplace, and airtight air to the house, the HRV and the ERV is not doing anything.
That was just completely an aside, but just it made me think of it.
Yeah,
it's a good question.
Yeah, this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. About it's like, there's needs that people have out there that we're just not familiar with in our climate here on the East Coast. So it's like, because I feel like I heard somebody talking recently about filtration systems for the smoke.
One of our listeners wrote in with her experience that she was glad she had an HRV or ERV during these wildfires because it was actually doing a good job of capturing particles that would otherwise been coming into her house. And she added some kind of additional filter in the box to collect terpenes, as I recall, right? Which is a byproduct of the wildfires. I guess you weren't on that show, Matt?
I wasn't on that show.
Yeah.
What you doing with those terpenes? Selling them on eBay?
It was a great letter. And
you're saying you could probably just make a blog post right out of that letter alone.
Yeah, right? It was. She had done her research and had experimented with some of this stuff. Well, I feel bad for these folks. They got kind of a whole mixed message, I don't know what I would do given where they're at. Like Jeff says, it changes the metric. Yeah,
I mean, our answers, our discussion here was kind of all over the place.
Yeah,
but I mean, basically, if you just break it down to the simple math, I mean, if you're in an area where these houses are worth a lot of money, it's certainly worth it to pay to have someone come in there, take a look at it, look at what the structural concerns are, moisture concerns are, deal with those first. And, but a full deep energy retrofit on a house in Redwood, California, this size, I mean, it wouldn't be that expensive for the size of the house to like replace all the insulation.
Except it's in California.
Yeah, I don't know. But it's like, I would, like you said, deal with the structure and moisture issues first. Then if you want to redo the siding and the roofing, then you can deal with air sealing at that point. And then down the road, think about the things like the heating and cooling systems.
It's a good question. And I would encourage our listeners who have an interest in this subject of like triage for, old house that's built cheaply and has some problems. Like what would be your plan? I would love to hear. And so that'll be up on the GBA website, and we'll put a link to it from the podcast page if y'all want to find it directly. It's a very good discussion, and it jumped out to me, so that's why we did it. Do you guys have anything to add about this subject or otherwise?
I could just say that it's really easy when you geek out on this stuff as much as we do to feel like you want to do some crazy makeover to your house. But you just really have to look at it. You just got to weigh your priorities of how long do you expect to stay in this house? How uncomfortable is it really? And can you deal with it with simpler means? And how much money are you willing to invest in it? Or is it just something that you're so passionate about that you don't really care about all those other things?
What do you think, Matt? Is there room for that kind of person in Matt's world, for someone who just is so passionate about wanting to make their house better?
I can understand wanting to do it, but I mean, I think there's a balance maybe that he's missing. I mean, if the idea is like that, having this lower load house is going to be better for the environment when you're putting all these new materials in, and the amount of time that it's going to take to pay off that carbon penalty from just adding all of those materials is way beyond, like the lifetime, it'd be way beyond this guy's lifetime. So, I mean, if he's doing it for environmental reasons, like that's the wrong tree to be barking up. If it's something to do with comfort, maybe, but I mean, like Walter said, if he just doesn't do anything and just keeps paying his power bill, he can put the temperature at whatever he wants, and that's going to cost less than all of these other, things that this guy wants to do. So, I have a hard time justifying going through all of that for It like I would much rather see this guy put that money toward building a new house. Like it's not
or
like
PV, right?
or
If it doesn't
PV.
have
Yeah,
PV,
that was another thing. Like as Martin Holliday says, like if everything's PV, then it doesn't really matter. Like if you're able to run all of your appliances on photovoltaics, then it doesn't matter how airtight your house is. Like you can build a big enough array and just supply all of your electricity that way, power your air source heat pump that way.
and it's sunny California. There's a reason people say that, right?
Exactly.
Jeff, what do you think? Does this make sense at all?
Yeah, I think, just safe, healthy, comfortable, then efficient.
Well, if any of you all out there listening have any further thoughts on this, we'd love to hear from you. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Matt, Rob, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. And I want to remind you all, please send in your emails suggesting who you'd want to interview and what you'd ask them. Either our contributors or the Fine Homebuilding podcast personalities, whatever. Let us know who you want to talk to, and we'll try and set it up. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks for listening, and happy building.